It was late, well past midnight, and the air felt heavy, like something bad was about to happen. I should have stayed in bed, but I couldn't. I don't know if it was curiosity or fear, but I slid out from under the thin blanket and tiptoed to my door. When I opened it just a crack, my heart nearly stopped. Mama Titi, my stepmother, was standing outside my sister's room. She wasn't moving, just standing there with her back straight, her shoulders tense. In her right hand, glinting faintly in the moonlight spilling through the window, was a knife. Not a kitchen knife either, this was one of the sharp, heavy ones my father used for slaughtering goats during ceremonies. Her face was different. Hard. Cold. Like she wasn't even herself anymore. I'd seen Mama Titi angry plenty of times, but this was something else. It was like she was made of stone, like she had no soul. She just stood there, staring at the door to Titi's room. I couldn't hear anything inside the room, no voices, no movement. Just the sound of the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. She stood there for what felt like forever. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. I wanted to shout, to ask her what she was doing, but the words wouldn't come out. My throat was dry, and my hands were shaking. And then, suddenly, she moved. Slowly, she turned around and walked back down the hallway toward her room. Her steps were slow and deliberate, the knife hanging loosely by her side. She didn't look around, didn't notice me watching. I stayed frozen by the door until I heard her bedroom door creak shut. I closed my door as quietly as I could and slid back into bed. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Why was she standing there with a knife? What was she planning to do? The questions swirled around my head, making it impossible to rest. Morning came, but I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I told myself I must have imagined it, that there was no way Mama Titi would actually hurt her own stepdaughter. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And that knife wasn't for nothing. Titi, my older sister, had been married for just a month. Her husband, Kunal, was everything you'd want in a man, kind, hardworking, and gentle. He always spoke softly, like he didn't want to upset anyone. You could see how much he loved Titi. The way he looked at her, the way he held her hand, the way he made her laugh, it was clear. They were happy, and everyone in the village admired their love. Well, not everyone. Mama Titi didn't. From the day Kunal started visiting our house to court Titi, Mama Titi made it clear she wasn't happy. She wanted Kunal for her own daughter, Beezy. Beezy was younger than Titi, and many said she was more beautiful. Her skin was smooth, her figure was perfect, and her smile could light up a room. Mama Titi always said Beezy deserved the best husband, and in her eyes, Kunal was the best. At first, Mama Titi's attempts to get Kunal's attention were small and sly. Whenever Kunal came to visit, she would accidentally bring Beezy into the conversation. "Ah, Kunal, you should try Beezy's palm oil stew one day. She cooks even better than her sister," she'd say, even though it was Titi who had prepared the food. She also started dressing Beezy in her nicest wrappers whenever Kunal was around. "It's good for Beezy to look her best," she'd say with a fake smile. But Kunal never seemed to notice. His eyes were always on Titi, and he only spoke to Beezy when it was polite to do so. After the wedding, things got worse. Mama Titi began showing up at Titi and Kunal's house uninvited. She'd knock loudly, carrying a basket of food or clothes, pretending to be helpful. "I'm just here to check on my daughter," she'd say, but she always found a way to mention Beezy during her visits. "Ah, Kunal," she'd say, sitting down without being asked. "Did I tell you that Beezy won the cooking competition last month? Such a talented girl, that one." Or she'd say, "You know, Beezy is learning how to sew now. Her future husband will be very lucky." It was awkward, but Kunal never lost his patience. He would nod politely and go back to whatever he was doing. Titi, though, could see what was happening. Her smile started to fade during those visits. I could see the worry in her eyes whenever Mama Titi walked through their door. But the thing about Mama Titi? She wasn't the kind of person to give up easily. What started as sly comments and uninvited visits soon turned into something darker. Something no one was ready for. It started like any other day. Titi had cooked lunch for her and Kunnel, and they had eaten together. By evening, she started feeling strange. Her stomach hurt, and she couldn't stop vomiting. Her body shook so badly, Kunnel had to hold her steady. Her skin burned hot, but she kept saying she felt cold. Kunnel didn't wait. He carried her to the village healer right away. The healer gave her some herbs and told her to rest. She's lucky you brought her quickly, the healer said. Her body is fighting something bad. Kunnel was confused. But she ate the same food as I did, he said. I feel fine. How is that possible? I knew the answer, but I was too scared to say it. That afternoon, I had seen Mama Titi in the kitchen. She was stirring the pot of soup while Titi stepped out to fetch water. In her other hand was a small packet of powder. She poured it into the soup and stirred quickly, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just salt or some special seasoning. But now, I understood. She had put something bad in the food, something meant to hurt Titi. Kunnel stayed by Titi's side the whole night, wiping her face and helping her sip water. She slowly got better over the next few days, but the house was different now. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken questions. One evening, after Titi had regained her strength, Kunnel confronted Mama Titi. She was sitting in our house, pretending to sew a piece of cloth. Did you put something in her food? Kunnel asked, his voice cold and steady. Mama Titi didn't flinch. She set down the cloth and laughed, a sharp, fake laugh that made my skin crawl. Why would I harm my own daughter, she said. If anything happens to her, I'd lose everything. Her words sounded calm, but her eyes gave her away. They were sharp and daring, as if she was challenging him to prove anything. Kunnel stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. He didn't say another word. He just turned and left. After that, he was different. Whenever Mama Titi came to visit, he watched her like a hawk. He didn't let her near the kitchen, and he wouldn't eat anything she brought. Titi tried to pretend everything was normal, but I could see the fear in her eyes. As for me, I kept quiet. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen that day in the kitchen. Not yet. But the image of Mama Titi stirring that pot stayed in my mind, clear as day. When the poison didn't work, Mama Titi came up with a new plan. She decided to use Beezy to try and take Kunnel away from Titi. Beezy was her real daughter, the one she always said deserved the best of everything. Mama Titi wanted Kunnel for her, no matter what. She started sending Beezy to Kunnel and Titi's house, with excuses. Sometimes, it was a pot of soup or fresh bread. Other times, it was a message she claimed Titi had forgotten to deliver. Take this to Kunnel, she'd say, pushing a basket into Beezy's hands. Then she'd whisper, men like women who are soft, not loud like your sister. Smile. Laugh. Let him see how much better you are than her. At first, I thought Beezy wouldn't listen. But I was wrong. She didn't say no to Mama Titi, and soon, I saw her trying. One afternoon, I was walking past Kunnel and Titi's house when I saw Beezy in the yard. Kunnel was fixing the wooden fence, hammering nails into the loose planks. Beezy stood close, too close, holding the edge of her wrapper like she was shy. She laughed at something Kunnel said, her hand brushing against his arm like it was an accident. Kunnel looked surprised. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his shirt, and his face changed. He didn't look angry, but he looked uncomfortable. Without saying anything, he put his tools down and walked into the house, leaving Beezy standing there alone. I felt a mix of anger and shame. Anger at Beezy for trying to come between her sister and Cunnel. Shame because I didn't do anything to stop it. When Titi found out what was happening, she was furious. That evening, she came straight to our house, her face red with anger. She didn't even sit down. "Mama Titi," she shouted, standing in the middle of the room. "Why are you sending Beezy to my husband? What do you want from me? What did I ever do to you?" Mama Titi didn't even try to deny it. She stood up slowly and folded her arms across her chest. "You don't deserve him," she said, her voice cold. "You're too plain, too weak. He should have been with Beezy from the start." Titi's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. "You're my stepmother," she said, her voice shaking. "You're supposed to protect me, not destroy my marriage. What kind of woman does this?" Mama Titi didn't answer. She just sat back down, acting like the conversation was over. That night, I saw Titi sitting outside her house, staring up at the stars. She looked tired, like she was carrying a burden too heavy for one person. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how. All I could do was watch and hope Cunnel stayed strong, because Mama Titi wasn't finished yet. The end came on a quiet evening. Cunnel had spent the whole day at the farm, and by the time he got home, the sky was already dark. He reached the door of his house and stopped. There was something sitting on the doorstep, a small bundle tied with red cloth. He bent down and picked it up, untying the knot with careful hands. Inside, he found chicken bones, dried blood, and a lock of his own hair. Cunnel wasn't a superstitious man, but even he knew what this was. Juju. A charm meant to twist his mind, to control him. It wasn't hard to guess who had put it there. This was Mama Titi's last desperate move, a way to make him forget Titi and fall for Beezy. But instead of fear, Cunnel felt anger. His blood boiled as he tied the bundle back up and marched straight to our house. When he arrived, we were all sitting in the living room. Mama Titi was weaving a basket, acting like nothing was wrong. Cunnel didn't knock. He stormed inside and threw the bundle at her feet. "Enough," he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "This is the last time. If I see you near my house again, I'll take this to the elders. Let them decide what to do with you." For a moment, no one moved. The air in the room was thick, like it was hard to breathe. Mama Titi just sat there, staring at the bundle. Her face was blank, no emotion at all. But her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up and set it aside. She didn't say a word. Not to Cunnel, not to anyone. That night, though, I heard her crying softly in her room. After that night, everything changed. Mama Titi stopped going to Cunnel and Titi's house. She stopped sending Beezy there, too. She didn't even talk about them anymore. But the damage was already done. Titi and Cunnel packed their things and moved to another village far away. They didn't leave a forwarding address, and they didn't come back to visit. Mama Titi pretended not to care, but I saw the way she looked at Titi's empty room sometimes. Our family was never the same. Beezy grew quiet, avoiding Mama Titi as much as she could. People in the village started whispering about Mama Titi. Some said she was cursed, that the juju had backfired on her. Others said she had gone mad. I didn't know what was true, but I knew one thing for sure: she had brought this on herself. Sometimes, when I walk through the market, I still hear those whispers. They say Mama Titi talks to herself at night, calling out for Titi and Beezy like they can hear her. They say she's been sick, wasting away little by little. But what I can't forget is the night this all started. The night I saw her standing outside their bedroom, holding that knife. I'll never forget the look on her face, or the way she changed our lives forever.